We all search for something. For some, it's success. For others, truth. But beneath every goal and ambition, there's often a quieter question: who am I, really? In a world filled with noise, expectations, and distractions, finding a genuine answer is harder than it seems. This is the story of a man who stepped away from his life, not to escape it, but to understand it. A journey into the mountains, guided not by maps, but by memory and myth. Along the way, he met a child, faced a storm, and stood before a mirror that reflected not his face, but his soul. What he found changed him forever. Perhaps it will change you, too. And the heart of the Swiss Alps, nestled between icy peaks and deep blue lakes, lies the small village of Zermatt. Tourists visit for skiing and the view of the majestic Matterhorn, but locals know the village holds something far more mysterious, a legend, passed from elder to child for generations, of a mirror buried somewhere deep within the mountain. A mirror, they said, that doesn't show your face, but your soul. No one believed it, of course, except Leo Muller. Leo was 35, a philosophy lecturer at a university in Zurich. By all accounts, he had a successful life, a stable job, a small but elegant apartment, and shelves filled with books by thinkers he both admired and argued with in his head: Kant, Camus, Lao Tzu, Nietzsche. But despite everything, Leo felt an ache he couldn't name. It wasn't depression. It wasn't burnout. It was something else. One day, after a particularly lifeless lecture on Stoicism, a student lingered behind. "Professor," she said, "do you ever wonder if we're just hiding behind ideas instead of living them?" The question haunted Leo. That night, over a cup of bitter coffee, he remembered something his grandfather once told him when he was a boy visiting Zermatt: if you want to know who you really are, find the mirror in the mountain. A myth, surely. But philosophy begins with wonder, and Leo, desperate for something real, decided to follow the myth. He requested a sabbatical and returned to Zermatt for the first time in 20 years. The village hadn't changed much. Wooden cabins, stone-paved streets, smoke curling out of chimneys. Leo stayed in his late grandfather's house, now covered in ivy and silence. On the first morning, he met old Frau Keller, who still ran the bakery. When he mentioned the mirror, she chuckled. "You philosophers love chasing wind," she said, handing him a loaf of rye. "But maybe wind is all we ever had." Leo began hiking each day, exploring caves, climbing slopes, speaking to shepherds and wanderers. Everyone had heard of the mirror, but no one had seen it. Some claimed it lay beyond the frozen pass. Others believed it wasn't a real object, but a test. What are you really searching for? Asked an old monk he met on the third week, Leo replied, "I want to see myself. The self beneath all these ideas, fears, and roles." The monk nodded. "Then climb higher." One afternoon, while resting near a glacial stream, Leo met a young girl named Mira. She was perhaps 10, with wild hair and a quiet confidence. She said her family moved from Geneva after her father fell ill. She loved the mountains, she said, they made her feel like her questions didn't need answers. Mira was fascinated by Leo's search for the mirror. She began to accompany him on hikes, asking endless questions. Why do people want to know who they are? Do ideas ever make people kinder? Is fear always bad? Leo, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a lecturer. He felt like a learner. With Mira, conversations weren't debates, they were shared explorations. She once said something that stayed with him: maybe the mirror doesn't show you anything. Maybe it just listens. One night, as Leo and Mira camped near the Eagle's Cliff, a spot a shepherd hinted might hold answers, a storm swept through the mountains. Lightning tore across the sky, snow fell violently, and wind howled like ancient spirits. They found shelter in a narrow cave, shivering, soaked. In the flickering light of a small fire, Leo confessed his fears, not just of dying in the storm, but of returning home unchanged. "What if I never find it?" he whispered. "What if I'm just pretending to be wise?" Mira looked at him with her usual calm. "Everyone's pretending," she said. "But you stopped pretending when you started climbing." The storm passed. In its wake, the sky opened up like glass. They hiked higher until they reached a place locals called Die Still Kammer, the silent chamber. It was a hollow in the rock, hidden behind a waterfall that only revealed itself after heavy rain. Inside, the air was strangely warm. At the end of the chamber stood a smooth wall of obsidian rock. It shimmered, not like glass, but like water holding light. Leo stepped forward. Mira stayed back. He looked into it. There was no reflection. No face. Only a vast, shifting space, filled with memories, moments, regrets, joys, everything he tried to bury or decorate. He saw himself not as a professor, or a thinker, or even a man, but as a thread in a long, endless weave of being. He wept. Not out of sorrow, but release. Then, in a quiet voice, Mira said, "Now ask it something." Leo hesitated, then whispered, "What now?" The mirror didn't answer in words. Instead, it showed him a simple image, his own hand, reaching out toward another's. And then, darkness. They left the chamber in silence. Leo didn't speak much on the journey back. Neither did Mira. Words seemed too small. Back in the village, he hugged her goodbye. She gave him a folded note and ran off toward the hills. On the train to Zurich, he opened it. It read, "The mountain didn't change you. You let it, now go and be someone's mirror." Leo returned to teaching, but not the same way. His lectures now began with silence, with questions instead of answers. He invited his students not to memorize ideas, but to live them. He told stories, not just of Plato and Descartes, but of Mira, the storm, and the mirror. Years later, when asked what he believed in most, he answered, stillness, courage, and the willingness to look, even when you're afraid of what you might see. We often think answers lie in grand revelations, loud triumphs, or perfect clarity. But sometimes, they arrive in silence, in a child's honest question, in the stillness after a storm, or in the reflection of a quiet life lived with intention. Leo didn't return with a treasure or a doctrine. He came back with something harder to define but more powerful, a deeper awareness of himself and his place in the world. He learned that the real mirror isn't hidden in a mountain, it's in every moment we dare to look inward with honesty, and every time we choose presence over performance. So, if you ever find yourself lost, overwhelmed, or uncertain, remember, the journey to understanding doesn't begin with knowing everything, it begins with the courage to climb, and the humility to listen.